This is episode 60 of the Wilderness Locals podcast. On this episode, my guest is Colton, Bagnoli, or as you probably know him, PapaWinkle. Colton is the shooting editor for Western Hunting magazine. This podcast is brought to you by Kafaru International, the toughest hunting gear on the planet, bar none. Frontiersman gear, high quality, completely custom, handmade knives made in the heart of the Peace Country. And as always, we're brought to you by Just Shooting Arrows, BC's premier archery shop. You've probably cost a lot of dudes a lot of money with that Instagram page of yours.
Oh yeah, I get that a lot.
It's like it's a pretty gun porn heavy page.
Yeah, you know, it didn't start out as that as much, but it quickly evolved into it with with just how Instagram works in general. But it kind of just evolved into a beast, and it was successful. You know, the plan was to just get information out there about custom rifles and rifles in general to anyone that was looking or interested. And that was the plan, and that's what it's kind of taken off into.
That's cool. Where does the name Pap Van Winkle come from?
It comes from one of my favorite bottles of bourbon that used to be really, really, I shouldn't say really accessible for anybody that follows the Pap Van Winkle bourbons, but it used to be a lot more accessible and a lot more affordable than it is currently. It got out of control with the popularity rise of bourbon, and now bottles that were $100 to $200 or thousands of dollars, and it's gotten kind of out of hand.
Nice. That sounds a lot. That sounds a lot like one of my favorite rifles, a Pre-64.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I remember picking those things up at Cabela's. Their old gun caves or used gun racks. And you could go in there and find it was beat up and well used, but you could find a Pre-64 for $400. Standard, 270 30-06 or whatever. You pay 7 or 8 for a 300 Win or a 338, and now it's just you don't even find them on the shelves anymore. And when you do, it's $1,000, $1,500, for a beat up rifle.
Yeah, that one that I built my 338 out of, I think I bought it for, I think it was $1,200, and it was like not in terrific shape. Like I wouldn't have shot it the way that it was.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, the action, it was that H&H action that I wanted with the big bolt face. So, yeah. So, maybe we'll back up a bit here and give people some background on you and who you are. And so you're the shooting editor for Western Hunting Mag.
Yeah, Western Hunter magazine. I've been writing with them for, almost 10 years. I've been the gun editor or shooting editor for them. And that all started with just, building custom rifles and knowing those guys at the magazine for, pretty much most of my adult life. Growing up in Arizona, being in the hunting community down there. And then just kind of turned into getting an opportunity from Chris Denham, the publisher there, and just basically starting to write articles about gun modifications and custom guns and what your money. The first article I wrote for him was just an article based on, what a factory Remington 700 is capable of, and then kind of the modifications you can build and what that looks like with like trigger upgrades, stock upgrades, rings and bases, ammunition. And then it turned into a 4-part series of a fully custom rifle, and kind of showed like what your money got you in terms of accuracy. And it was a really successful article for him, and it kind of took off from there.
I actually really enjoy Western Hunter. Like all of the contributors to it do a really good job of how do I say it? It's not like it's not nuts and bolts, but it's realistic articles that are actually useful. I find a lot of these mags these days are putting out articles that are not actually applicable to anyone. Whereas Western Hunter's putting out really good content. I read almost all of it, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's been a big focus of Chris and everyone just to keep, you know, those types of articles going and to really focus on what people want, you know, and what is, like I said, what's applicable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. And when did you get your start hunting?
Oh, hunting? Oh gosh, probably, man, I remember shooting birds with a BB gun when I was probably like 8 or 9. Shot my first deer when I was 10.
Nice.
You know, elk when I was, you know, maybe 11 or 12. So yeah, it was, you know, grew up in a family that was very, very involved in hunting from an early age. It's our main source of protein and everything going forward, and just a big annual thing that you looked forward to every year, drawing a deer tag or an elk tag. And back then in Arizona, it was, you know, relatively easy, I should say, compared to what it is now. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you got to go do something every year at least. And then once it started to get more difficult to actually go hunting is when I started guiding. So I started guiding hunts, worked for a couple outfitters down there in Arizona and Mexico, and
cool. Guided
hunts for quite a few years. Started my own taxidermy business down there and kind of focused on that for quite a while before I, you know, got a job offer working for a gun company up here in Montana where I'm at now, building custom rifles. But, you know, once I kind of got 18, 19 and started getting to that gun buying age and, you know, driving around and hunting on your own age is where the spark for, you know, the custom guns and just rifles in general kind of took off.
Mm-hmm. That's very cool. So it sounds like you've kind of hunted all over the U.S. then.
A little bit. I mean, yeah, done a little bit on the East Coast. I want to do more. Hunted out in West Virginia once, and Montana, Utah, Idaho. Mostly the West is. I mean, obviously my bread and butter where I focus the most is because it's close and what I know. You know, elk, bear, deer, sheep, antelope. You know, all the typical stuff you find out here in the West. But yeah, I'd love to get out and hunt more in the East and maybe even hunt the West Coast a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. There's so much to cover in, North America. Like, I'm here in BC, but it always freaks me out when we start looking at Western states and how they're available to basically anyone and everyone with 2 feet and a pulse. It's pretty wild down there. Like how much is available over the counter too.
Yeah, and and it's gotten so popular. It's a lot of states are starting to cut back on over the counter because it's getting so inundated with hunters and with pressure. It's crazy to see. Some states are starting to get harder. Like Montana used to be, you could always apply for the tag for an elk or deer as a non-resident, and there'd be leftovers. Mm-hmm. Like not enough people applied for what they had quoted, and then it turned out to where now, just a couple of years, it's hard to even draw. Mm-hmm. I know guys that are not even drawing, and there hasn't been leftovers for quite a while. And so those opportunities are drying up in Montana for sure. And I know Idaho changed their rules and making it a little bit more difficult. You got to pick your areas, but yeah, there's still tons of opportunity. And if you just get a tag, it's, the public land opportunities are, almost endless. Mm-hmm. So much it's as open as you want it to be, how much you want to put into it.
Yeah, totally. What sort of, as a guy that's been in this space or this industry and also recreated in it for a long time, what's sort of your opinion on the explosion of growth inside hunting and is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What do you think?
Oh, it's definitely a good thing. I mean, the more people that are aware and active, I guess, educated in it, it's more voices on the side for conservation and for hunting. Right. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a double-edged sword, man. The more people are in there, the more people want in, the less opportunity there is. And that's just kind of, it's just part of it. I think there's no way around it.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's what's best for wildlife. People kind of lose sight of that and they're like, oh crap, I don't get to go hunting this year, but if the states are generating more money and the foundations are raising more money for wildlife, and it's actually going towards wildlife conservation and, putting more sheep on the mountain and, deer in the mountains, that's ultimately what matters to me. If I don't get to hunt every year or every other year, but there's, better land conservation and better habitat conservation, and that's a win for me. I can get past it, Other guys, not so much, but, everybody's just got to kind of check themselves and check the ego a little bit and remember what it's all about. We've kind of lost sight of it, I think, in general. So, it's a political subject for sure and gets people kind of fired up.
Totally. We haven't, here in BC at least, and maybe Alberta, we haven't felt the sting the way that our American brothers have in some of those states. I mean, you talk to some folks in Arizona and when they say, oh, I hope I get to hunt deer this year. That's a pretty foreign thing to us still.
Oh, for sure.
I mean,
and for me too, is like as a Montana resident, I get an elk tag and a deer tag every year.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, the hunting opportunities are good, but, I would gladly trade in, an elk tag, every Montana for every 5 years or, 6 years or 8 years for one good bull tag in Arizona. I mean, the hunting in those states and Mexico, man, it's incredible. If you're in the right area in the right time,
yeah.
And the quality of the bulls and the number of bulls you see. I mean, as much as people want to harp on the game and fish, down in Arizona for, what they've done. I mean, because for a while they were putting way too many tags in there trying to create opportunity and believing that they were sustainable. And I think they've kind of changed that a little bit because they realized maybe it's not sustainable or maybe something else changed that we're not aware of. But they seem to be kind of a little bit more cutting back on some of that stuff and cutting back on some of the opportunity hunts that have higher pressure, maybe not as high as success, but cutting back on some of those higher pressure hunts where it's just like you go down there and you can't get away from people. And to me, that's not as much fun. You know what I mean? Like I'd rather hunt fewer, more spread out than hunt every year. And it just be like a circus. I'm not afraid to get off the road, but you hike a couple, 3-4 miles and you're still seeing hunters and they're right up on you. And there's like people just cutting in front of you. And there's no like respect kind of when it gets that crazy, kind of like a mob scene out there, it kind of loses its luster for me.
Yeah. No kidding. I mean, when, before this recent trail cam ban went in Arizona, those photos that you'd see of cameras on water holes were just kind of like, they were kind of funny.
It's ridiculous, man.
Yeah. Like, look, I mean, from you looking as a Montana resident and me as a BC resident, like we don't see that stuff. That's crazy. No, nowhere near up here. And, having hunted and guided down there for most of my adult life, I've only been in Montana for 10 years. So 28 years down there in Arizona, growing up hunting and fishing, guiding, it was out of control and it got worse and worse every year. And, people want to say, well, the camera doesn't kill the animal, but, I don't know, and I might piss people off, but I think, again, it comes back to that, like what's fair for the animal. And when you start taking away their ability to move without being seen, that's no longer fair chase. Yeah.
And I think we've lost sight of that principle in a lot of stuff. Yeah. You still have to kill the animal, but if it wasn't such an advantage, people wouldn't have lost their minds so much over it. The guides and outfitters wouldn't have been so upset. Right?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, you wouldn't lose your mind over it if it wasn't a huge advantage.
No.
Yeah, it's fun to go out and you still can go out and set cameras in Arizona. You read the law, you can still go out and set them. You just can't, hunt that. And I don't know how they're going to enforce it. And I don't know what that looks like, but if you were just viewing them, but very few people, I shouldn't say nobody, but very few people are just viewing them. Just setting out cameras, putting that much effort. No one's buying 300 cameras like some of those outfitters and paying people to run them and change chips out every day and then pick up, those chips every night, find out which water tank the biggest mule deer in that unit hit that night, and then go pick up his tracks right at first light, right when, you know he was on that camera 2 hours ago, and then track that buck down and kill it. Like, I don't know how you can argue that that's fair chase.
Yeah.
You still hunted, right? Yeah, you still hunted, but was that a fair chase hunt? I don't know. It's arguable, I think. It's not something I really want to be involved in personally, but that's just me.
Yeah. I'll talk about BC here for a minute because that's what I know best. They just changed the regulation here in BC, I think not last year, the year before, to basically make cellular cameras prohibited inside August 1st all the way to December 10th. And the idea behind that was that you couldn't get any real-time data from the field, right? So, I mean, right. I run a pile of trail cameras, but I run them like, 3-4 hours deep in the bush, and right. And at the opening of season, I'll check them and kind of hunt my way to the camera and see who's in the area, and have a good look at what that camera did over the winter, and that's kind of it. It's sort of just, I don't know. I think that's the sort of, I mean, like I don't want to, I guess, ethical, or maybe like maybe the way that cameras and camera traps are designed to be used, right, to give you just an idea. And then, but you're not like, okay, there's an elk 400 yards away, I'm gonna go sneak over there, right, with all the cellular stuff. And then for sure, like you said, guys checking them that night and then getting there in the morning, you're right, it doesn't seem fair.
Right. And like I said, it's obviously there's a lot of different ways to look at it, in terms of, you guys are used to, well, we still have to hunt it. We still have to be able to stalk. We still have to. And it's like, yeah, but, like I said, it's giving you an unfair advantage, right? If that mule deer would have been able to know that somebody was going to come pick up his trail in 4 hours, he probably would have changed his path, right? Who knows? But it's hard. It's a tough battle for sure, because it's just emotional. And people don't want to lose their rights, and I get that. But at the end of the day, I said people kind of lost sight of what it's all about. Yeah,
I think too, like with guide and outfitters, it's a little bit of an issue too. Just because it's less work for them. It's less. I know it's a lot of work to run 300 trail cameras, but it's also less work than having a one of your young Wranglers or whatever sitting up on the hill with glass instead.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, in a lot of the big outfits in Arizona, man, those governors and auction bulls, man, there's like 15, 20, 30 dudes involved in those. Yeah. Glassing and radios. That's the other bigger thing that's more of a concern to me than cameras is radios. You can still use radios in Arizona, and that's how a lot of those guys communicate the positions of bulls. And those elk don't stand a chance. Once they're picked up, they don't stand a chance, man. Yeah. 1,000-yard capable rifles, radios, cell phones, game cameras, like that combination. There's a reason that we're killing bigger and bigger stuff every year and more frequently. They're killing the biggest stuff every year just because, and that's not just Arizona, that's Utah and Nevada and New Mexico. A lot of states don't have those laws preventing that stuff with the radios and stuff. It's a huge game changer, because you've got so many people out there. It's only a matter of time before an animal makes a mistake. Yeah, it steps out into an open. It's like, that shouldn't be a mistake that steps out into the open and somebody spots it and relays it back 4 different ways. It's triangulate its location. The guy sneaks in and shoots it 10 times from 1,000 yards. Yeah, we actually just had that conversation yesterday. Because we are 18 days out from a mountain goat hunt here. And the area that we're going is pretty rugged and pretty remote. And there's actually 4 of us going on the trip now. And I think we're probably going to pack some VHFs in just for safety, just for communicating. But I think we all agreed, when we're on animals, the radios get shut off. Oh yeah. And that's why a lot of those, Pope and Young and the place have those laws in place for the books, the fair chase laws.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the actual functional use of a radio should be like, hey, bud, there's a grizz 50 yards from you to the east. Like, you know, heads up on a swivel when you're
right.
watching.
You know, where I'm going, you know, where I'm at, you know, if somebody gets hurt, you know, radios have a huge role in safety and in the field for sure. But, you know, guys just got to kind of shut it off and get back to the old days of hunting and not just be so focused on the grip and grins for Instagram.
Yeah, for sure. So should we dive into the rifle thing a bit?
Yeah, man. Whatever you want to talk about.
Awesome. So I really enjoyed the podcast that you did with Nolan at Journal of Mountain Hunting there.
Thanks, man. That was a fun one to do. Those are fun guys to talk to. Yeah,
they're great dudes. I talk to Adam all the time, and I talk to Nolan quite a bit too. Those are great dudes. I think Nolan's gone guiding now. I mean, it's August.
It's gotta be that time for him.
Yeah, today's sheep opener, actually, now that I think about it. Wow. So all the BC boys will be getting after it and putting them rifles to use, I think.
Awesome. Good for them.
Yeah. So I regularly say on this podcast, I'm not a gun guy. And I don't mean I'm not a gun guy by I don't have a whole pile of guns. I just mean it's not something that I have been focusing on in the last, you know, couple decades of my life.
Right.
But I recently grabbed 2 pre-64s and did a couple rifle builds, and I figured if I was going to get into shooting, just go for it from the nuts and bolts. And I'd love to kind of talk to you about sort of maybe how do I word it? Like maybe, you know, the jumps that guys make when they go from a over the counter rifle to a custom rifle, and then kind of the sort of the differences and what they can expect. Cause there's some pretty damn good production rifles these days, eh?
Oh, for sure. And, you know, that's probably like the biggest question, you know, I get asked a lot is, you know, do I really need to spend, you know, $3,000 on a custom rifle to shoot, you know, 1/2-inch accuracy when a $300 Ruger or $400 Ruger does that? And it's like, right, you know, there are rifles that are capable of the accuracy, but it kind of goes a little bit beyond that, right? You know, if you only want a lightweight rifle that you can beat the hell out of and you don't care about your rifle, because that's what most guys say, well, it's $300. I can just throw it in the truck and not care about it. Mm-hmm. Well, then, yeah, you should probably totally buy a cheap rifle that you don't care if it gets stolen or if it gets beat to hell. But there's a lot of guys that, you know, want nicer equipment and don't necessarily rely on just that accuracy. You know, they want something that is, you know, not necessarily nostalgic, but, you know, something that's reliable, has been like built by an individual that's very meticulous about what they're doing in the custom gun world. Right. Mm-hmm. And cause you definitely get, I think, more from a custom rifle than just, you know, a pretty rifle to look at. They feel better. They're more balanced. The stocks are more, you know, obviously fit to you, although more production rifles are starting to come with adjustable length of pull and adjustable, you know, adjustable cheeks to where you can face. But, you know, there's just a lot of ways you can go. And it really just comes down to what's your application and what's your budget. You know, those are the big things that I kind of steer guys towards when we start talking production versus custom. Because if you're not in the custom price range, then obviously, you know, you're down in the production line. But even then, there's a ton of really good rifles that I would classify as production that are, you know, in a couple $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, versus a $4,000 or $5,000 custom, which most custom rifles now, you know, if you don't provide parts, you're buying one like off the shelf from a builder, you know, they're $4 or $5 pretty easy if it's all custom components.
Yeah. And there's kind of been this wave of, I don't know what you call them, semi custom rifles with like the, the Fierce and the Christensen and I think Gunworks is the big one, right?
Yep. There's a ton of them that have come out. And it just kind of depends on, a custom rifle to me is one that's, it doesn't necessarily have to be hand chambered. Some guys will classify it as it has to be chambered by a person on a manual machine. And I guess that was a big portion of when I was building custom rifles, is that it was built by a person. Like every aspect of that thing was built by a person on a machine or by hand cutting those parts. But with the progress we've made in machining, it's kind of hard to argue about, the quality of a hand chambered rifle versus a CNC pre-fit barrel, because the tolerances those machines hold is way, way beyond what most guys can, definitely me, more than what I could hand chamber a rifle by feel or by, a digital readout on a lathe. Those machines are capable of so much more. And then the measuring devices some of these companies are using to measure the tolerances and run out wasn't available, 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago when I was building. So it's changed a lot. And you can get a lot from a CNC cut chamber that, it's incredible what they're putting out nowadays, and then when it comes to like stock work and bedding, that's where a lot of guys start looking at like, okay, well, yeah, they may cut it on a machine, but it's all hand cut, hand bedded, hand sanded and fit to the stock, custom, in terms of how the rifle was finished and built. Whereas a lot of companies, they're not even doing that anymore. They're hand chamber or CNC chamber in a barrel, having the stock that's molded exactly for the inlet, and then just slapping them in there. And that's where you kind of fall into that semi-custom where they're no longer bedded to the gun. They're just very tight tolerances in their inlet, and maybe have like a V block or some type of block system or pillar system that, holds and secures the action to the stock. And that's where it kind of falls in that semi-custom realm, because they're shaving so much labor out of that stock, with running that system versus a fully bedded, fit stock.
Yeah. And I guess when it comes down to it, the real difference that we all care about between a production rifle and a custom rifle is your ability to be consistent, right?
Yeah. And a big part of that, it depends on the rifles, is overlooked is that rifles fit to the shooter, right? And with a custom rifle, that should be, if you're having a custom rifle built, length of pull, like all those things should all be a factor, right? Because it's huge. If that rifle's too short or too long, or you're not getting a good cheek weld off that stock because it doesn't have adjustability or the comb's not set right for your face, you're going to struggle. You may spend all the money in the world and the rifle may be capable of it, but if it doesn't fit you, you're going to have a harder time getting the performance out of that rifle that it's capable of if it's not fit properly to you. And that's where a lot of production rifles fail. Like I can pick up a production rifle and shoot pretty good groups out of it, on average, depending on the rifle and the ammunition, whatever. But I know how to cheat it, right? I know how to get what I need out of that rifle in terms of its fit. Typically they're all too short for me. I'm 6'5", so I've got a longer length of pull. I've got super high cheekbones. So my face is, super low cheekbone. So my face fit on a rifle is totally different than most guys and that's what they're building those production rifles after, right? The average kind of number and the length of pull and stock cheek fit. So yeah, but overall, it's accuracy. And that's what most guys kind of focus on is, well, still shoots a tight group, at 100 yards with factory ammo. So, that's where I'm at.
And out of that custom rifle, you can fit all that stuff and end up exactly where you're comfortable, right? I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Because I said, and that's like the training aspect. That's kind of what I kind of push to people is just like, hey, look, if you've got $4,000 as your budget, right? and you're just getting into long range shooting or long range hunting or, you know, precision rifle, whatever you want to call it, you know, I necessarily wouldn't probably spend $4,000 on a rifle and optic right out of the bat. I mean, obviously it would get you further, but training should be kind of included in that, and making sure that, you know, because gun builders don't necessarily have the time to, you know, fit a rifle to you or teach you proper fundamentals behind a rifle. So you can buy a $5,000 rifle, and I've seen guys do it. I've seen guys at the range with, you know, $10,000 Gunworks, fully done up, right? Ammo, scope, the full gamma from Gunworks, and they produce a phenomenal product. In that regard of what their niche is, of building those custom loads to a rifle and getting them to shoot, and then building those turrets to where it's like a turnkey package essentially, right? But you'll see guys at the range and they're like, well, I spent $10,000 on this thing, but I can't get the thing to group at 100 yards, or I can't hit anything at 400 yards. And it's like, well, it's because you don't have any training. You don't know what you're doing behind the gun. And well, I've been shooting a rifle for, you know, 20 years. And it's just like, well, yeah, but doesn't mean you've been doing it right for 20 years.
Yeah.
And so that's why I always say there's a kind of an aspect to it. It's like, well, don't spend all your money on everything right up front, because there are some great rifles in that, you know, sub $1,000 range that can get you a great start with like a case of ammo and some instruction. You will be far, far more well-rounded and more accomplished of a shooter than the guy who spends all of his money on a full build, you know, rifle, or, you know, rifle and optic and no ammunition or training, right? Just like 100 rounds to break in the barrel, and then I'll just shoot it before hunting season, kind of an aspect. So I kind of push guys that way as well, just because that was always a struggle. You know, when I was building rifles, we had a quarter-minute guarantee, 5 shots, quarter-minute out of our rifles. And it was an accuracy standard that was kind of hard to offer, because not everybody's capable of shooting 5 shots inside of a quarter inch. And you'd get tons of guys that were just, oh, this gun doesn't shoot, I'm sending it back. Okay, send it back. They'd send it back, and we'd shoot the ammo, and bam, I'd bang out a quarter-inch group, send them a picture, and be like, man, I don't know what to tell you. Everything's fine. And they're like, well, it doesn't do it for me. Well, it's not the rifle, it's you. You know, that's like basically calling them a son of a bitch. You know, they would just, how dare you, you know, question my ability to shoot a rifle. Well, there's a lot more going on than just, you know, getting behind the rifle and pulling the trigger. And, you know, even though they spent $5,000 on that custom rifle, it was tough. That was like the hardest part of that world. The most frustrating is it's like, you know, God dang, guys, like, you spent the money, you got to spend the time now.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that leads to an interesting question. What would you say the first step is for, you know, maybe a guy that's been shooting most of his life, but he wants to shoot better, and he's about to maybe jump into the custom rifle pool. How does somebody go about checking those foundational skills out? And if they're not there, how do they firm them up?
The biggest thing is, if you don't know anybody, if you don't have like a buddy or friend or somebody that you can actively shoot with, right? Like someone local to you that has the experience, has the background. They don't have to be like a, you know, military sniper. Those aren't necessarily the best guys for the job, but somebody who's got a lot more experience, obviously, than you, and is capable of kind of working through those fundamental steps. More likely than not, they've been trained. And so it's like, if you can't find somebody locally to shoot with, then you should look for formal training. And there's quite a few guys out there offering a lot of it now. There's very few that I would recommend, but you know, just getting that the basics, the fundamentals of marksmanship behind the rifle, like that's huge. That type of stuff is when you get somebody set up in that realm of just, this is how you connect to the rifle. This is how you influence the rifle. This is what you need to do in this order. You will see a huge turn in their ability to shoot. I mean, just it's one of the coolest things to watch. when you see guys struggling, and then you kind of, just kind of, hey man, try this. And you start kind of lining guys out, right? And you watch their groups just shrink up, or maybe not shrink up, but maybe that plate that they've sent, 20 rounds at, and they haven't connected more than once. You watch them go like 3 for 3 with just some changes in their position and how they're connecting with the rifle. Like that's super cool to watch. Right. And, so that for most guys, if you're trying to get into it and it's something you want to do and you don't have that person, start looking into training near you. That's why it's difficult, right? Because guys in BC may not have access to the same, guys down here that, and I don't know anybody in Canada. Hell, I had questions about custom builders in Canada, and I had to reach out to all my Canadian followers, just like, hey, who do you guys build? And who do you recommend? Right. Cause I didn't know. And it's kind of the same way with instruction. I don't know any rifle instructors up in Canada. So you'd have to come to the US. Well, that's not kind of a problem right now.
Yeah.
So it's tough. Right. But, the big one for me is Modern Day Sniper. The guys over there, Kaylin and Phil, have done a great job putting together online content as well as, range, like in-person training.
Yep.
And they figured out a really good way of putting that together. So, for the guys in Canada, that would be a good place to start, because you can do it without being here. You can sign up online and get their stuff and start taking their courses, online. I know it sounds complicated and sounds kind of like, well, you just said somebody's got to watch you. And well, yeah, but if you kind of see somebody do it, you can also, figure it out and work through it. And you can always, like I said, it's easier just to kind of watch their videos and kind of go forth through that way if you can't make it to an in-person training. But training is the biggest thing I would recommend to people for getting started. Not necessarily a high dollar rifle, because you can get a lot out of a lesser rifle in terms of semi-custom or production. But get that training benefit of that money that you would allot to training and ammunition is going to get you so much further than that big ticket rifle. As much as I love custom rifles, right? And I love them. Like that's what I do. I don't own a single production rifle. That's what I recommend for people, because that's where I see the biggest. That's where I see the biggest improvement, or the biggest. Like that satisfaction in the shooter is when they are making hits and they finally figure it out, right? You see that look on their face of, wow, okay, now this all makes sense. And now I can't miss, right? And that wasn't necessarily the gun, because they had the same gun ammunition before and couldn't hit anything. And then just with a little bit of instruction, 30 minutes, all of a sudden they're just like a totally different shooter. So imagine what a couple days on the range with, a good qualified instructor that knows how to get people to connect with their rifle, right? It's like your opportunities are endless.
Yeah, no kidding. That's funny. We see the same thing in the archery space quite a bit. We see guys that every year will get the new flagship bow that comes out. The life cycle of a modern compound is like 10 months right now. But you see a guy get a new compound every year and doesn't spend any time learning to shoot it, right?
Oh, for sure.
And I don't know. We shoot those 3D courses all the time, and you see guys that are just, I don't think you should shoot it at a real animal, dude. But they're just not. They don't have the trigger time, right?
And when I was in Arizona, I'm a big bow hunter, even though my page doesn't reflect it. Especially traditional bow hunting. I've got several longbows and recurves, and I totally dig it. And I build my own arrows and geek out about traditional stuff a little bit more than the compound stuff, just because I love trad bows and can get behind it. But yeah, when I was shooting 3Ds and stuff a lot and shooting compounds, yeah, you'd see it all the time. Guys spend all the money in the world on a 3D bow and they couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. And so it's kind of like, yeah. And now I can imagine now with like all these like extreme archery challenges where I have all the targets are 80 to 140 yards.
Oh yeah.
I couldn't imagine how, it's great for arrow manufacturers. I bet they sell a ton of arrows after those events. And arrows getting trashed. But, yeah, I haven't been in that world in a while, but just the little bit that I've seen, I'm like, glad I'm sitting that one out. That's a little crazy.
Yeah. What are you shooting for a stick bow?
Right now I had shoulder surgery last year. So a buddy of mine lent me a real light bow, and it's, oh man, the name's escaping me. I can't think of the name of it, but it's a sweet bow. I don't have it with me right now, but my two bows that I was shooting a lot was a Palmer,
cool.
Custom. And then, I've got a Habu, can't even think of the name of it. I think it's an older Habu, but, they're sweet bows, but man, they're from my younger years when I had a good shoulder and could pull some weight. So I've had to closet those up, and I actually just boxed up the Palmer. I'm going to ship it back and get some lighter limbs for it.
Oh, nice.
Made up just because I love that bow. It's always been a good bow for me. But I'm looking into getting some new bows, and like I said, shooting this one bow that my buddy loaned me. It's a sweet little long bow. It's dead quiet, dead in the hand. It's sweet. So I'm definitely looking at some new bows options and stuff down the road. Now that my shoulder's fixed and doing better than it was before, just kind of seeing where I settle in for draw weight and see where I end up before I purchase a new stick.
Yeah, that's wise, man. Take care of that shoulder, right? Without it, you can't do a lot. So. Oh
yeah, it was getting bad. I mean, I had to take a couple of years off from bow hunting just because I couldn't shoot enough to where I felt, I was good enough to ethically hunt, without shooting 15 yards. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was struggling. It was painful to shoot. And, there comes a point where it's just like, you can't shoot past that. You got to stop. And then I ended up having an actual injury. I couldn't figure out why my shoulder hurt. And then I actually snapped my bicep tendon.
Ouch.
And when they were in there looking at that, they're like, oh yeah, we found all this bad scar tissue and stuff that they attributed to too much archery shooting. They said it's super common to have this AC joint all bound up and just a lot of soft tissue impingements from scar tissue and cartilage from just excessive use, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so they went and ground all that stuff out and cleaned up that joint. And now it's like butter. When I pull a bow back, there's no pain. It's nice. It's like, oh man, I barely remember what that feels like. Cause the last 4 years of pain, 5 years of pain, kind of, I started shooting archery probably when I was 10 too, and, forgot the feeling of what it feels like to pull a bow back without pain.
Yeah. Being so tall, you probably have a stupid long draw length too, right?
Oh yeah. It's like 30 and a half or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. That's wicked. That's funny. We could get sidetracked on archery stuff here for forever. It's such a rabbit hole. We try to do one stick bow episode a week with a different boy or whoever, right? They're pretty fun, man. But
oh yeah, for sure.
Okay, so getting back to rifle stuff and so if somebody does have the fundamentals down pat and has kind of worked through that, when they make the jump to a custom rifle, I guess the first step is figuring out what platform to build off of, right?
Right. Yeah. I recommend everybody kind of start with the action first, because that's kind of like, always been considered the heart and soul of the rifle, right? The purpose of the action is to, take a round from the magazine, put it into the chamber, fire that round down the barrel, and then extract that said round from the chamber and then eject it out the ejection port. Sounds pretty simple, but that's where things can kind of go awry for a lot of actions. So then that's where the Pre-64 has always been my kind of favorite hunting action in general. Just the marvel of that action, and just from when it was designed and when it was built, like the tools that were available to those guys to manufacture that action is incredible. Mm-hmm. From a manufacturing standpoint, which is why you don't see it today, because it would be extremely expensive to manufacture that action in that method of how they designed it. And there's better machining practices today that would kind of streamline some of it. But overall, guys kind of went to the push feed just for its simplicity, because you can just throw a round in there and slam the bolt home. It doesn't have to come in from underneath the big claw extractor. Mm-hmm. But For those guys that don't know, I mean, just the control round feed system of the Pre-64 and the Mausers from long ago is built for a reason. They're super, super reliable. I mean, that bolt took that round and put it into the chamber, fired it, and never let go of it, right? It never lets go of it. It never loses contact with that round from the time it pulls it out of from your mag box, off your follower. It's got full control of that round in and then full control out. Basically, it pushes it in and then throws it out. And it's just a super reliable system. That's why you see it in African dangerous game in Alaska. A lot of those guys are all running, as far as I know, control round feed actions, whether it's a Pre-64 or an old Mauser or something similar, just for their reliability. Because if an action can't do those things 100% of the time, it's kind of a worthless action to me, right? I don't care how much it costs. If a little bit of dirt gets in there and binds it up and it doesn't work, well, that's a worthless action for the application. And so you kind of have to find your goal. I want a lightweight mountain rifle. Okay. Well, you still need reliability, but you want to shave some weight. Where can you shave weight safely in action? So there's actions you can steer towards that way. If you're just shooting competition, there's actions I would steer you towards, just for competition shooting, just for, recreational shooting, that type of stuff. Right.
Yeah.
So once you kind of figure out your application, then figure out the action that best suits it. And what you want, and then kind of build from there. Right. And that kind of also stems to the cartridge, because obviously action size is kind of relative to what cartridge you want or trying to use for your application, which again, it's all kind of application based. For guys only hunting, large, heavy boned, grizzly bears, moose, and elk, obviously it's a different action than somebody who's just hunting, little whitetails or antelope. It all is kind of application based. But yeah, it starts with the action and the barrel and the chamber and, or the cartridge, and then kind of goes from there with stock options and, what best suits your shooting. If you're shooting, a lot of prone or a lot of longer range type open country stuff, there's stocks that are better suited for that. But if you're hunting, darker timber and you're shooting stuff at closer quarters, there's better stocks that are suited for that as well. And so it kind of is all application dependent.
Yeah. So a lot of cats, I think, that would go down the custom rifle rabbit hole, they're going to try to, I think, check off multiple boxes with one rifle, right? Like when they're building a rifle, they're going to want something that can shoot far, but is still packable, like that seems like the sort of, it's like what do they say, with service, you can have quality, speed, or cheap. You only pick two, right?
Right.
I kind of wonder with custom rifles, where do we make the compromise?
Yeah. Yeah. Because the one area that I wouldn't compromise, because I've got custom guns with all kinds of different actions, but there's one thing that has always stuck with me where I'm willing to try, different actions and mess with them because they've come a long ways. Right.
Yeah.
I got lots of different stocks, but two areas that I don't find myself compromising or going outside of what I know works 100% of the time, just because, I don't get everything for free. Right. And everybody else says, oh, you get free stuff, so it's easy. It's first of all, nothing in life is free. You pay for it, whether it's monetarily or with your soul. Working, things cost something.
Absolutely.
And I don't like wasting my time, and I don't like wasting my money, just like anybody else. Right. And I don't like wasting people's money, recommending products that are garbage. So that being said, the two areas that I don't skimp, that I don't ever venture outside of my safety box, is my barrel and my trigger. Those two things for me are huge, right? I've seen way too many triggers fail, and every trigger can fail, right? So I kind of base it off my personal experiences over my time running a bolt gun, and I shoot a lot. I shoot a lot more than the average guy. So I kind of run into more problems than most people will see in their time in the field. Those two areas are the areas that I don't skimp, and I'll experiment with some different actions and some different stocks and try different stuff out. And I'm starting to think about trying some different barrels. There's a lot of new barrels coming out. but man, it's just hard. It's super hard for me to go outside of my wheelhouse in that, because I love barrels that shoot super accurate and that don't change their point of impact. Mm-hmm. Right. And I love triggers that work every single time and go bang.
Yeah.
And don't hang fire. And those are scary, scary triggers when you start seeing triggers hang fire. And and like I said, every trigger is capable of it in the right circumstances. But I base it off of my experiences with running guns a lot and running a high volume of triggers and rifles and not having those issues. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I kind of lost track where we were going because we started getting around on rabbit holes. But
that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. So kind of once you figure out what action you want to run, the sort of heart of the rifle is the barrel, right? I mean, I think I've heard you say the barrel is what gives you your accuracy, that it being chambered with a high degree of precision and then kind of going from there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it is. I mean, if the lands and grooves of a barrel aren't like straight and true, obviously this goes without saying, right? Everyone thinks about a barrel, it's got to be straight, and the inside of that barrel has to be consistent. But you'd be surprised. I've shot a lot of barrels, and I've shot a lot of different manufacturers' barrels, and it really comes down to their processes and their lapping of those barrels, right? Everyone kind of cut rifle barrels, right? We'll focus on that, because button rifle barrels, I don't mess around with button rifle barrels very much. I'm just not a big fan. Not to say that they aren't good and that they don't shoot. There's Lilja and some other companies make some great button cut rifle barrels. I'm just a big cut rifle guy. I prefer cut rifle barrels. In my experience, they're easier to work with. They're easier to break in, and they're more consistent in terms of the results you get barrel to barrel to barrel to barrel for me. So a cut rifle barrel, they cut them all the same, right? Or so to speak, right? In terms of how they cut those grooves and how they cut those lands. But there's a big difference, because some manufacturers, I'll get a barrel from them. These are leading manufacturers, big name barrels, and 150, 200 rounds into that barrel, it's still super fouling. It's not really shooting that great. Velocity's changing, right? And you're just kind of like, holy cow, how much ammo am I going to have to put through this barrel before it settles in, right? And it seems to be like 150 to 200 rounds. And right now, that's a lot of money. Like, that's a ton of money and a ton of time at the range, with powder and components prices as difficult as they are. Right before, guys didn't really care as much, but now it's kind of like, holy crap. That's painful. And so there's companies out there that are streamlining that lapping process and making it to where those barrels are more uniform on the inside, and the lapping processes they're utilizing are giving you a barrel that breaks in fewer rounds, right? Like 20 to 50 rounds, less than 100. And that barrel's pretty much set. And now, granted, things will change, regardless of who makes the barrel. Steel is steel and bullets are bullets, right? There's going to be a variance, and you're going to see different things in each barrel. But I'm talking overall, I'm talking of like a 15 to 20 barrel sampling, not just one or two. Most guys base it on a very narrow sampling, right? They get one barrel and they're like, oh, this thing was junk. It didn't shoot well, or, however, they want to judge it, but it's based on one barrel or two barrels, right? I base everything on like a dozen, 15, 20 barrels. It gives you a better sampling of what you're going to see. So like I said, I shoot a lot of proof barrels just because they seem to have a better process, in my opinion, of producing that clean bore that breaks in extremely quickly, and holds a great point of impact without shifting, regardless of heat and how many rounds you have down that barrel. It seems to be a very smooth transition from initial break-in to kind of mid-barrel life, whereas I haven't experienced that with a lot of other barrels. That's kind of like what I said, where I kind of stick with those barrels because they've done really, really well for me in a wide span of barrel life. And that's carbon and steel, regardless, just through their processes. So I don't know if that answers your question about barrels.
Yeah, for sure. One thing,
give some insight.
One thing that stood out to me when you were talking about gunsmiths on the Journal podcast was you said you should be able to ask your gunsmith some questions and they should be able to answer them for you, right? And if they if they give you the old, oh, it's proprietary, that can be a red flag.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, I understand maybe there's some things that they don't want to share, but at the same time, you have to be able to be sure that they know what they're doing and that you're going to get the tolerances you're looking for. And it kind of rang true with me from the barrel side too, because I did some barrel shopping when I built these two guns, and I landed on international barrels in my backyard here in Chilliwack, BC. And one of the things with them is I called Ryan up over there and I asked him about 45,000 questions, and he could answer them as rapid fire as I was sending them over, and it's like, this is the degree of tolerance that we accept. This is how we do it. This is what your break-in period is going to look like. This is yada, yada. And the break-in period for their rifles is like, send 20, clean it, let it rip. Like,
right. Which that's what it should be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's super important for guys to, know to do with, I mean, even with going back to bows here, even going with stick bows, like how close are we going to be to my draw weight? It's all the same thing. It's like, how much precision am I paying for? Right.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And when you're looking at those custom rifles and talking to, not just custom rifles, like from a custom builder, but if you're looking at, I'm trying to think, like Christensen or a lot of these semi-custom rifles, talking to those guys, you should be getting the same type of information. This is what we expect out of our rifles. These are what we guarantee. And you should be getting the same response that you got from those guys at International, same response I get from the companies, that I choose to, buy my products from. Mm-hmm. You should be getting the same responses. They should be well versed in their field and then stand behind it. Some of those rifles I've tested in the past, and those rifles fell so short of what was promised and guaranteed, mm-hmm. that the rifle was shipped up and sent back. And I don't even work with those companies. I won't waste my time, and I'm not going to waste other people's, time and money. Not just because the rifle didn't do what it said it was going to do. It's just because how the companies respond to that. Mm-hmm. Right. A lot of them get defensive and start blaming you, blaming the scope, blaming whatever. It's just like, hey man, I'm just here to tell you that this rifle doesn't do what you said it does.
Yeah.
And I'm not being unreasonable. But before I go and write a review or talk about a rifle, better do what you say it's going to do, because that's huge. Your name is everything. And I've been there, right? Mm-hmm. I ran my own business and I've got to stand behind, a reputation. And, sometimes I fell short of a mark and did not, get the rifle done or, get things done in the time that I thought I could get them done. Well, you got to make that right with the customer. But at the end of the day, that rifle or barrel or action better do what you say it's going to do, every time. And, granted things happen, but how you respond to your customer service is huge. It's a huge component. And so that's good to know about International Barrels. I'm not super familiar with them, being a Canadian based company.
Yeah.
But that's good to know that those guys are so well versed in their product. That's
good. They're on it. I'm a complete pain in the ass, and they were great.
Yeah. And you should be, I mean, I was a custom builder, like I said, and people used to call all the time. If you're calling and asking questions that are like applicable, like that's good. Mm-hmm. But, if you're calling and changing, components or changing things all the time because you're chasing fads on forums, like, I've talked about forums and
oh yeah,
they're the devil. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of information, but there's a lot of misinformation. And guys start getting wrapped around the axle of chasing velocity and chasing things with new cartridges. And well, if I seat this bullet out into a medium, or an XM length action, I can get this kind of performance. Well, you can get that performance out of a 7 mag. So why don't you just go long action and go with bigger cartridge? Well, I don't want to go that because that's generic. It's just kind of like, holy cow, well, what are we chasing here? And you're trying to squeak so much out of these rifles when it's like, dude, the difference at 1,000 yards is 1/10 of a mil, 2/10 of a mil, 3/10 of a mil. You're kind of chasing some rabbit holes that can get super frustrating, and you're really not achieving much.
Yeah, I often we get into it with archery stuff all the time, where it's like guys get to a certain point where they're making changes or making modifications to arrow builds or whatever that literally have no downrange effect, and they're burning a whole bunch of energy thinking about it.
Oh, for sure. That's kind of like where I fall in that same space of like traditional bows and custom guns. You can really kind of geek out and really fine tune stuff. And it's really cool to harvest an animal or to make a shot on a target with an arrow you built from a custom bow, or from a bullet you hand loaded through a custom rifle you built, like for me building my rifles, or a custom rifle built by another person. That's cool. There's a lot of pride in that for me that I kind of like. And they're kind of similar, even though they're totally different, right? Hunting styles, right? One, you can shoot animals that you can see from long ways away, and another, you have to stalk and get super, super close. But the precision side of it is what I like on both sides. It's very demanding from the shooter. You've got to be on top of your game to deliver precision fire from a rifle or a longbow, right? Now, granted, one's easier, right? Obviously, well, it's easier to shoot a rifle. Well, it probably is easier to shoot a rifle, and depending on what you're talking about, just to shoot a rifle, it's also easy to shoot a longbow. You just pull it back and let go,
let it rip.
But there's a lot more into stacking arrows at 30 yards with a longbow. Just like there's a lot more to stacking bullets at 1,000 yards with a rifle than just shooting a rifle. Pointing it at a deer, or pointing it at a pie plate at 100 yards and just shooting it. Yeah, there's not really much skill set involved there.
So I don't want to go through every component of a custom rifle build on this podcast. Yeah. You just did that with Journal there, and it was phenomenal. So we don't need to rehash that. And I would urge anybody that is interested in building a custom rifle, or what Colton is doing, to head on over to Journal Mountain Hunting and listen to that podcast. It was phenomenal. But I kind of want to get into some stuff like, what do you, when you're building a hunting rifle, what's sort of the goal for you? Like, are you trying to build a 6.5 pound rifle? Are you trying to build something that is, kind of a little heavier that shoots well? What's sort of the goal? And I know you're probably going to say it depends on the application, but let's go with maybe like a mountain rifle or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, it depends on the application totally. But yeah, I mean, if I'm trying to build a mountain rifle, and for years I carried heavy rifles even up in the mountains, just because they were just easier to shoot, more forgiving. And the components were not quite there for super lightweight rifles for high volume shooting, right? I shoot my rifles a lot. So when I was building like lightweight rifles in that 6 pound range, years back, they didn't hold up well, right? The stocks would crack and the thinner barrel profiles would just kind of shoot out, and it just didn't really hold together. But with today's capabilities and stock manufacturing and barrels, it's a lot more achievable to get a super accurate rifle that'll last, years and years and years, and, thousands of rounds, depending on caliber. So yeah, the biggest thing is obviously making sure your actions, the appropriate action for what you're trying to do, and it's lightened in the right areas, and not just, randomly skeletonized by some guy with a Bridgeport, and some spare time. That kind of gets scary. I've seen some actions fail from that side of from that side of stuff, where guys just kind of start getting a little crazy with trying to lighten up actions. yeah, and then just getting the proper contour barrel for what you're trying to build. But yeah, for my approach is, action barrel and chamber, making sure it's a cartridge capable of what I want it to do, and being realistic. I want to be able to, harvest a mountain goat in inside 500 yards, and I want to be able to put it down in one shot. I'm not going to super over gas it and, go with a giant Magnum recoiling rifle. That's going to be harder to maintain my follow through and see where that bullet went, right? Because everybody misses. Things happen. You got to be able to follow through. And that's the kind of drawback with a light rifle, and why I always carried heavier rifles, is they just didn't move as much. So you could always see your impacts. I hate muzzle brakes. They're
the worst.
They're the worst things ever. And so with the legalization of suppressors in so many states, I pretty much shoot suppressed all the time. Now, granted, a muzzle brake does do a little bit better job, especially on lighter rifles, of mitigating that recoil and keeping you on target better. I can't lose any more hearing. And carrying hearing protection is always tough for guys. Yeah. I've got custom ear pro that I wear hunting, and it's super nice, but man, those batteries can die, and, things can go out. And next thing you know, you're taking a muzzle blast from a muzzle brake, and man, it's painful. And ears ring all day, and now you're not going to hear the grizzly bear sneaking up on you because your ears are ringing. So, I shoot suppressed, and I recommend people shoot suppressed when they can, where legal and where applicable, right? Yeah. But if you can't shoot suppressed, muzzle brake is it's a big part, because you got to see where that bullet goes, especially with those light rifles. They move so much. But a big part of that is stock design too. Having the right stock that's designed to kind of push that rifle into the proper place is hard for people to understand how that would come into play. There's a big difference in stock design in terms of how the rifle recoils and how it responds through stock design. It's crazy. So making sure you're running a reputable stock company that's got the right stock. It's one that is fit to you. But just having those newer modern stocks that, you said Gunworks was kind of the first one to kind of come out with some really neat stocks that I took rifles and barreled actions and threw them into some of their stocks, and was like, holy cow, that's a different rifle. It totally recoils and responds totally differently, just in a different stock. That's pretty impressive to take a big 30 Nosler, out of one stock and put it in another stock. And it's totally easier to see impacts at, 400 yards or something like that. It's easier to see impacts at further because you have more time to recover. But, those 400 yard shots, sometimes those bigger rifles are harder to follow through on. So selecting a stock that, and then that, like I said, it all comes down to personal preference. I can't say that there's, one size fits all for everyone, because McMillan, they make a great, Game Warden stock is one of my favorite stocks from them, because I really like that, the ergonomics and the hand position of a pistol grip style stock. But some guys don't like that. They want more of a traditional Monte Carlo style stock. So it kind of goes back and forth between those two of, personal preference and what you like, but also making sure that the rifle is going to respond well to it.
Yeah, for sure. And then, okay, so here's the stumbling point for, I think, everybody and their dog. In today's world of endless options, it seems like there is a continuous flood of new hot calibers and new debates for each of them.
Oh yeah,
it's wild, man. It's like I feel like every time I turn around, there's a new caliber, right?
Oh yeah.
What are you looking for in a caliber, or in a cartridge, rather?
Yeah. The big thing for me is bullet performance. That's kind of where I start everything, is kind of what is that? What bullets are available? And of those bullets available, in my experience, or in reliable people's experience, how do those bullets perform on game? And if there isn't a whole lot of data to support that, you should probably steer clear. right? Like a lot of that stuff's designed for like match shooting and, super fast, super flat. Now, granted, guys talk about 300 PRC versus 300 Win Mag, right? There's no doubt that a 300 PRC is a more efficient cartridge than a 300 Win Mag, right? They were designed so far apart in time and capabilities that it's a no-brainer, right? I still love my 300 Win Mag. If I had one gun to run for the rest of my life, it'd probably be a 300 Win Mag. Just because I know that cartridge, I have so many components for it. I have the bullets that were designed for it. Man, they're great and they work well. And I've got rifles chambered in it that I really shoot well and I'm confident in it, right? And it kind of comes down to that confidence thing. And 6.5 PRC and all the new hunting cartridges that are coming out, they all have their place, and it just kind of depends on, again, it all comes back to that application. But making sure you're selecting the proper bullet is a huge part of that. If there's not a good hunting bullet that's like a Nosler or a Hornady or a Burger, if there's not somebody making a hunting specific bullet for it, I would steer guys clear of that. If guys are offering a custom chamber for a custom cartridge with a custom throat to a specific bullet, man, that really better be the perfect combination for what you're trying to do. And you better be able to access a lot of those bullets, because what I have found over the years is when guys have those wild cartridges, even if they manufacture the ammunition for you, you're still restricted to your components. And if they can't get those bullets, like a 195 grain Burger 7mm EOL right now is like unobtainium, right? You can't get those things. So if you've got a custom 28, or 7mm, 28 Nosler or a 7mm, it's got a custom throat, to that thing, to that bullet, you may struggle to find another good hunting bullet that will work in that rifle. So you kind of pigeonhole yourself. And so unless you're capable of buying, 500 rounds of ammunition or 1,000 bullets and, 200 pieces of brass for that rifle, I would advise you to steer clear of those things, because you will regret it, unless you're set up for it. By all means, if you got all the money and it doesn't matter to you and you have the resources to get all that stuff, cool, have at it. But like right now, it's kind of a telling time, that component availability is really dictating what people can and can't shoot. And those popular cartridges, right? I remember like a couple years ago with all this stuff started off, and guys were like, well, that's why I shoot a 30-06 or a 308 or a 300 Win Mag, because that ammo will always be available. I haven't seen 30-06, 308 or 300 Win Mag on the shelf in a long time. But you know what I keep seeing on the shelf? 6.5 Creedmoor, 6.5 PRC. I haven't seen any 300 PRC, but some of those hotter cartridges is because those companies are producing more of it because of the demand. But I mean, I don't know about up there in Canada, but like I haven't seen 30-06 or 270, on the shelf in, man, a long time, maybe a year.
Yeah.
8 months.
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, it's sort of a crapshoot here in Canada right now. I am swimming in 338 Win Mag, but I can't find 280 Ackley for the life of me.
That's kind of a tough one.
Yeah, when we're shooting factory ammo, but
yeah.
I mean, there's stacks of there's stacks of 6.5 on the wall, and actually there's quite a bit of 270 available here right now too. I don't know if is there? Yeah, maybe it hasn't been in fashion here in a while and people just aren't buying it. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, there's a lot of new 270 type cartridges with 27 Nosler and 6.8 Western and all those other new ones that are kind of drawing some attention in that realm. But yeah, when it comes down to it, making sure that those the bullet's going to do what you want it to do, and making sure you got the right bullet is a big part for me when in those recommendations for people, if that answers your question. Yeah.
So that's kind of been so we'll get into some selfish stuff here. I'll try not to keep you too long this morning, but
oh, you're good, man. I got time, man.
Cool. So we'll get into some questions for myself here. So one of my big stumbling blocks with bullet selection has been that when like you're hunting and you have a bad experience and just you let that shape everything that you're doing going forward. That's where I'm at with bullet choice. I had a 7mm Rem mag not perform on a elk at close range. And me having not been very deep into the gun rabbit hole in quite a while, I was shooting a bullet that proved to be too soft for, a 19-yard shot.
All right.
Yeah. Like that bow hunter mindset, you get close to everything. And so I had a bullet fail at close range, and it's kind of been shaping my process. So with the amount of bullets that are available today, with, all the different Nosler ammo and, Burger and Barnes, and there's so many options now. Maybe what are your kind of top hitters? And I know part of it's going to be, again, application, right? But is there a kind of dual bullet that you like? Like what's your go-to, I guess, is my question.
Yeah. And on that same kind of topic, I was the same way when I was guiding hunts. Man, I would see guys with 270s and 7mm like wounding elk constantly. Mm-hmm. And then I'd see hunters show up with like 300 Win Mags or, 300 Weatherbees, and they would just dump them in their tracks. Yeah. Right. And it was super easy to be like, well, man, 30 cal's way to go, and I never really it was enough of a pattern that I was like, obviously it's the cartridge, and maybe it was the shooter too, or the bullet was probably a bigger thing. But back then, a lot of burgers were failing, man. They were bad. Same thing, shoot a bull elk at 50 yards with a burger in the shoulder and it'd blow up and we'd never find the bull. And you're like, how is that even possible? How do you shoot an elk at 50 yards and not recover it? Yep. Right. So it's like, that's horrible bullet performance. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of one of those things where, there is no golden bullet that's going to do everything perfectly, right? You're not going to have a bullet that's going to expand it 100 yards perfectly on game and 1,000 yards. Like, I don't care what anybody says, the manufacturers or anybody tells you. If they tell you different, they're a liar. It doesn't exist. I've never seen it. Mm-hmm. But what I can tell you is that, like, for your typical hunting scenario, 100 or 50 yards. I've never shot anything with a rifle at 50 yards or 19 yards. That wasn't like a follow-up shot, but in that realm of your standard hunting distances, I would say 100 to 500 yards, right? That's where most guys seem to kind of draw the line, is at 500 yards, maybe 6, with capabilities today with rangefinders and rifles, right? Mm-hmm. But it seems to be like most guys are kind of limiting themselves to that 500 yards, right? Mm-hmm. In my experience over the years, the Nosler AccuBond, it has always been a proven performer. I've never had that bullet fail me. Mm-hmm. And I've never had it fail a hunter, where, like, I think that when you put a good shot on an animal, right? Because people would also judge a bullet by its performance. Like, well, I hit it in the guts and it didn't kill it. Yeah. Well, that's not really a good way of going about that bullet performance, mm-hmm. There. But the 180 grain AccuBond and the 30 cals has always been just a hammer. The 140s and 160s and the 7mm, and the 130s and 140s and the 6.5. Like, when you put those bullets in an accurate rifle and you put a good shot on the animal, I don't care what it is, 100 to 500 yards, that animal is dead. That is the most consistent performing bullet that I have ever found. Yeah. In my experience. And we shot a lot of animals with it. I mean, a lot. Black bear, antelope, elk, mountain goat. I've seen sheep killed with them, moose. It's just the most consistent performer in that realm. If you're one of those guys, like 100 to 500 yards, and you want the ultimate bullet performance, start with an Nosler AccuBond, hands down. I don't care the cartridge. I don't care. 7mm, 6.5, 270, 30 caliber, 338. It's an awesome performing bullet. Now, where things start to change is from 500 and beyond, right? That's where the higher BC bullets start to really carry more energy and have an advantage over that bullet. but the AccuBond wasn't designed for that type of shooting, right? No. People kind of have forgotten to do that. When that bullet was developed, 500 yards was a freaking poke. That was a long shot. We didn't even have rangefinders when that bullet was designed for that stuff. I know because I was shooting, I was hunting, back then, and it didn't exist. So it's totally different realm, right? But once you start getting out of those distances, that's when you need some of those higher BC bullets to help carry that energy, kind of defeat some of those external factors like the wind and stuff, but also to get that bullet to perform and paying attention to the minimum velocities from the manufacturer for reliable expansion. Those are a big place to look at. I've always found through experience that, 1,600 feet per second, and 1,000 foot-pounds of kinetic has always been kind of a good parameter to stay within. If your bullet, when you calculate it out on your app or however your ballistic solver, whatever you use, those numbers should be kind of where you need to stop shooting. If your bullet is falling below that, you are entering some bad juju in terms of your ability to ethically put an animal down with a single shot, right? Mm-hmm. Regardless of how well you can place that bullet. I don't care how good you are at shooting. You can shoot 3-inch groups on a bench rest rifle at 1,000 yards, cool. But shooting a hunting rifle in hunting conditions is totally different. And then that bullet performance is huge. And like I said, seeing those burgers perform poorly back then, they've really changed their processes. And now I'm kind of circling back to being a fan of the burgers and seeing some awesome performance.
Oh, nice.
At 150, 200 yards on black bear, seeing some awesome performance, that was just devastating. And then seeing the same type of devastating performance at, 600 yards, 500, 600 yards on elk and deer and stuff like that. Where you're like, wow, that's kind of a good performance all around. Whereas before it was like, man, you better not shoot stuff up close with those, or you're going to have a bad day. But, this last couple of years, I've had some really bad performance with other bullets from other manufacturers. And I avoid them like a plague. And it wasn't just like you were saying, like a one-time deal where it's like, oh man, I shot this deer one time. And, it was kind of like, wow, I shot one animal and I was like, yeah, that was not optimum, but whatever, it worked. And the next one, you're kind of like, yeah, well, that worked, but okay. And then the third one, you're like, well, that was horrible. And the fourth one, you're kind of like, yeah, back to, well, it's not ideal. My AccuBond or this, I think would have performed better, but it's hard to say. But it all ended for me with multiple shots on a deer at, a distance that the bullet should have been performing well within, its performance range. I was well within those velocities, and I was getting horrible bullet performance. I've never put so many bullets into a deer. And it's just like, this shouldn't be happening. Like, what is the deal? And then after, finally getting the deer down and, doing a necropsy on it. I mean, I do necropsies on every animal, and really, I don't do a very good job at photographing it and going through it because that's not where my brain's at. No. I wish I was a little bit more that way, or I wish I had a professional photographer to follow me around and take all kinds of cool pictures. Yes. But I hunt by myself most of the time, or with one hunting partner. And it's just not kind of where our brain's at. It's kind of like, hey, let's cut this thing up and get the hell out of here before a grizzly bear finds us. Yep. And so we kind of look at them and see. And when I can't even find a piece of a bullet and it didn't exit, that's not good. No. And then, or if I do find an exit and it's not on path with the trajectory angle, that's not good, right? When a bullet's doing like a hard 90 inside an animal and it didn't really hit anything that should have caused it to do that, I've got some issues. Yeah. And so like that stuff being all things involved, it's hard to know, right? Because if you don't have those experiences to draw back on, it's kind of hard to draw a good conclusion based on what you see on Instagram or social media or on the forums with guys saying, oh, I shot this elk at, 1,400 yards with a 6.5 Creedmoor and 143 grain ELDX. And it's like, I'm the first guy to call bullshit and say that that's probably not an accurate statement. And it probably wasn't very clean. So again, it kind of falls back on, on what's your idea of bullet performances and success. If shooting an animal 5 times to put it down is okay and acceptable, well, then we have a vastly different opinion of bullet performance and shot placement, right?
Yeah.
You'd think it'd be like, it'd go without saying, but it's not. And I had guys literally argue with me. It's like, well, you put 3 shots on an animal real quick, and it puts it down, in this time frame, then I think that's good, acceptable performance. You can't expect them to fall over dead. I'm like, dude, I've watched animals shot with an arrow that died faster than that. Mm-hmm. So, yep. You're talking about, broadhead or bullet performance. There is a real thing in terms of like what you should be expecting in terms of performance and effectiveness in killing that animal quickly. And an animal running around or taking minutes to die, after having a bullet through it, or, longer, multiple rounds, that doesn't really fall into the term of acceptable performance for me.
Yeah, totally agree. It's funny when you talk about, or reading online or forums, and it's like, there's always a certain bit of, I don't know, what do you call it? Heroism, like people like making themselves the hero of their own story. Yeah. Like, it's just, like archery, I think. Archery's right up there with the bullet choice stuff, but you hear it all the time. Like, yep, shot this guy, fell over dead. Then you find out the story from somebody that was there, and it was a day of blood trailing and whatever else, right?
Yeah, everyone always ironically leaves that out. Like, I can't read I can't read articles anymore, like the bow hunting stuff or even rifle stuff. It doesn't really matter, like the personal stories. And I feel bad because I'm probably missing some really cool stories that really did probably have some like 100% legitimacy. Mm-hmm. But there's so much that I've read that I have backstory to, like I know the people involved. And I'm like, that is so far from the truth of how that went down.
Oh, yeah.
That's like nauseating to me. Like, you need to be the perfect hunter so bad, regardless of whether you're a bow hunter or your rifle, right? But the 30-yard blood trails of bow hunts, to me, I'm like, man, all my years guiding, I only ever saw like 1 or 2 of those.
Yeah.
So it's just like, how does this always work out for all these guys writing these stories? And more power to you. More people. I love people writing stories and sharing their experiences, but I just wish there wasn't so much ego involved and just people being more honest. Because I think people learn more from the honesty, man. If people read more stories about bad things happening, or poor shot choices that guys made, I think people would be like, oh wow, like that's good to know. But when they're just like, oh, that guy shot that elk at 83 yards and 12 ringed him, and the bull went 50 yards and died. Oh, well, and maybe that did happen, maybe it did. But I just think that there's a lot of fluff and embellishment in a lot of that stuff. Like you said, like that heroism, just like guys trying to make themselves like out to be this like perfect, hunter and figure. Like, you never make mistakes and you've never made a bad shot in your life. And it's just kind of like, I'm not going to believe that one.
I spend most of my life screwing stuff up. So.
Oh yeah. I spend more time on the rifle bench cussing rifles and bullets and load data and missed shots than anybody on Instagram would ever share. Right. Mm-hmm. And, I've thought about just posting just misses for like a full year, just video and misses on steel.
Yeah.
Just to kind of offset all the crap. It's like, look at this cold bore, 900 yards, and it's like 3 rounds touching. I'm like, yeah, like, again, totally possible, but highly, highly unlikely.
In one of my group chats, my one of my closest groups of friends, we're all archers, and you go on there and you shoot a good group and you send it to the group chat like, I got this thing working good, and then it's just the razzing of the group of friends there is just insane. It's like, you don't have to walk right up to the target and push them in by hand, right, dude? Like, get out of here.
Oh yeah. It's just like you walk out, every day I try to shoot like a cold bore arrow, right? Mm-hmm. That's like my big thing. The cold bore arrow at the beginning of the day or end of the day, just one shot. Like, could I made that shot today? 15 shots into it, it's kind of like a rifle. Well, yeah, but how many times do you go out hunting and have 15 shots to make it work?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like that one shot to me is more important. And yeah, I mean, if I posted an Instagram photo of my first shot, whether it's my longbow compound or my rifle, out of the gate, my first cold bore shot that was like dead on perfect, that's exactly where I wanted that bullet to go, there would be like one post a year.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right. Maybe two. And anybody says different, I'm like, okay, cool. Well, good for you, man. Like, it's not reality, right? But most of that stuff is super hyped up just for social media. And I think it gives people a false sense of what they should expect from themselves and what they think is reality. Yeah. I can't
handle the BS inside the hunting industry. It's just, it's not for me, man. I don't know if you follow him, Jake Downs. He's a traditional bow hunter, but he does he was doing, I don't know if he's doing it now. I think he's probably off to Alaska or something. But he was doing a everyday cold bore and one arrow and then spending the rest of his day thinking about how bad he screwed up. It was pretty entertaining, but no, he's a real killer. But no, it was cool to see a guy like that puts a pile of animals on the ground. Not every shot's perfect, and the majority of the shots aren't perfect. So it's important to work at this stuff, right?
Right. And just to understand that getting into it, especially for the guys getting into it, whether it's the same, right? Whether you're shooting a slingshot, a longbow, I don't care what your weapon is, like, be a master of it and understand that you're going to miss, and you need to be able to learn from those misses, because you're going to gain so much more learning from those misses than from, a whole bunch of shots trying to get one good shot, right? If you're not learning from those misses, you're never going to get to where, you're aspiring to be, where you don't miss, or you have fewer misses and more hits. And when I say hits, like, you're grouping super tight with, whatever weapon system, you're shooting. I think people just kind of get wrapped up around, the like you said, like the heroism, like, oh man, look at what I did, or look at what I accomplished, and kind of short tracking it, trying to cut that curve down. And we're all trying to cut the curve down and get better and be more efficient, more, with less work, I guess, less energy. But there really is no way of short tracking that. You've got to spend the time, you've got to put in the effort, regardless. And spending, kind of circling back to rifles, spending a whole bunch of money on a rifle and custom ammunition, while it helps cut that curve down dramatically, you still got to put in the time, and you still got to be a master with that tool.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Just circling back a little bit here, I wanted to ask you, and you and I have talked about this offline a little bit, what you think about these 100% copper rounds that, like a Barnes TSX or TTSX.
There's a lot of them coming out now. You got like hammer bullets and Barnes and Cutting Edge, and I think those are the big ones right now. Barnes has been around forever. They're solid performers. I've never had to use them, so I've never really kind of ventured that route. I've messed with them. I might have shot them on paper, but my game shooting has been very, very limited. But the people that I know and that I trust, that use a good system of reporting bullet performance,
I
mean, they love them. I know guys that are shooting them in 300s and 338s and 280s, and even some guys shooting them in 6.5s and having great results. Again, they're not a super long range, bullet for performance on game. While they may be super straight and super consistent, those cutting edges and hammers. I mean, they're talking about consistent bullets. You can't get a better bullet than a hand turned, copper projectile. They're super expensive. But you definitely have to keep that velocity up to get that expansion to get those bullets to pedal. So for your typical, hunting distances, like I said, that sub 500 yard stuff, man, I think they're a great option, and they perform really, really well when coupled with the proper, caliber and distance and rifle setup on the animal that you're trying to harvest ultimately. I think they're really cool. I want to spend more time with them and shoot a little bit more game with them. Hopefully this year I'll get a rifle dialed in with some Barnes or some of the hammers. I'm going to try some of the hammers. I get a lot of questions on those. They're also a Montana based company. I've gone down and seen their facility and checked their process out. And it's crazy. Like, it's super cool to watch those machines work and make those bullets, and the precision, seeing those guys sitting there with calipers, measuring bullets as they're coming out of the machine is kind of cool to see. Like, these guys are really dedicated to producing a high quality product, and they're not cheap, but seeing those guys work, I'm like, yeah, that takes time, and time takes money. But from what I've heard from guys I trust, they're super good. I've said my experience has been super limited with them personally, being honest. I don't have a huge personal database to draw on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I was having a hard time getting the Nosler AccuBond factory ammo to shoot out of that 338, and one of the rounds that I'm too scared to run that grouped awesome was that ELDX, but it makes my palms sweat thinking about it. So yeah. That
bullet's got a lot of controversy behind it. There's some guys that swear by it, and other guys like myself that, man, I steer clear. I give it a wide girth, man. It's just kind of one of those things for me. And it's a lot of guys, some guys love it. I got buddies that swear by it and haven't had any issues. And maybe I'm just cursed. Maybe I just had bad luck, but there's a lot of guys out there in that same kind of realm. It's kind of like, man, they shoot great, but and when there's that but following, you're kind of like, oh, but what, well, it doesn't really do that great on game, or it overexpands, or, kind of whatever. And it varies. That's what's weird about it. Some bullets it performs really well, or some calibers it performs really well in, and then others not so much. Right. I shot a mountain lion with a 300 Win Mag a couple of years ago. It was, I think it was just under 600 yards with a 200 grain ELDX. And, man, it was one of those ones where it's like, the one time I made like the perfect shot and was like super proud of myself. It was downhill, like I'm all jacked up because you never get shots on mountain lions.
Yeah.
Out. And we've been watching this mountain lion stalk a bunch of mule deer, and then it blew the stalk and scared off all the deer. And then it's like usually that's when mountain lions disappear. And this thing just walks down this closed logging road closer to us. He goes from like 750 to like, I think it was just under 600. And just stops like perfectly where I'm naturally set up behind the gun, where the rifle's naturally pointed, and I'm just sitting there. And it was just kind of like the wind and everything was just like the perfect, like everything was perfect. Right. And I broke that shot, and I remember watching that bullet impact that cat, like dead center, right behind the shoulder, just pinwheel this cat. I could see the impact, and I was like, oh, I just smoked that cat. And it just goes rolling down the mountain, running off, and then it dies in 15 seconds, 20. I mean, it was so fast. It was just done, right? And a 300 Win Mag, I mean, it's a lot of energy on a cat, right? But what's funny about it is when we walk over to where I shot the cat, I go down to get the cat, and my hunting partner kind of just starts looking around, and he found the bullet. It went through the cat, hit the dirt, bounced off the steep embankment behind it, and then just fell right back down to earth.
Oh, wow.
And it's got like, and I've still got the bullet on my desk, and it's got really good mushrooming and performance in it. And it and it worked great, right? Put the bullet right where it needs to go. And of course it better, perform. Mm-hmm. It was just interesting that it had just enough energy to come out of that cap and just kind of bounce off some stuff and then fall right back down. It had kind of done its job. And it's just like, wow, that's perfect. Right. But then where I started to have issues was in the 6s and 7mm range with the higher velocity stuff is where I started to see some issues with those bullets. But, I haven't had any issues with 30 cals or 338s, but, it varies, it all comes back to that application, that specific bullet, was given velocity and a certain twist rate of your barrel, right? That all comes into play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's super interesting, and it's a rabbit hole no different than archery, where you can spend a great deal of time figuring out what you want to be doing, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's awesome.
And it comes back to money too. Like, how much money do you have to throw at it, to buy ammo and to buy bullets? Like, if you don't hand load, right, then you're limited to what's available. And that's a reality for a lot of people. I hand load all my own stuff. And so I get the capabilities to make, if a bullet's going to shoot in a rifle, I'm going to figure it out. Right. Yeah. And you're going to make it shoot. Right. And I've shot a little bit of, factory as of late, just doing some testing, and it just got so difficult to come by and to get, and started to see like weird results. Like, one box would shoot well in one rifle, but it would shoot horribly in another. Well, that's not a testament of the ammunition necessarily, or the barrel. Not to say that barrel won't shoot, but it just won't shoot that bullet. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where I kind of got away from the modern, the big companies of production or factory ammo, just because it's hard to get those, and it's hard, right, to get those bullets, or a given bullet to perform in all rifles, just because it's chambered in 300 Win Mag. Mm-hmm. That's really hard to do. Like, people give factory ammo a hard time, and they say, well, it doesn't shoot well, it doesn't shoot. It's like, well, you go load up one load for one rifle and then go find 10 buddies with that same rifle and that load that shoots well in all of them. Mm-hmm. Right. It's not easy to do. It's hard because all those different chambers, all the different barrels, all the twist rates. And so it's tough, it's super tough for the factory guy, but today's modern, factory loaded ammunition is the best it's ever been. I'm sure, in terms of accuracy and bullet selection. There's a ton out for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My last real selfish question, and then I want to talk optics a little bit, which is also selfish because I'm dealing with that too. But I have this other Model 70 that I have yet to shoot because I've been focused on this 338, getting it to shoot that TTSX well. I'm just trying to figure out ammo for it, and we talked about it offline too. But I think the first ammo I try is going to be probably 140 grain AccuBond
for the 280.
Yeah,
man. Like, if you can find it, I built quite a few of them, and then I've tested a few rifles built in it, and I've got one being built. I've got a Pre-64 being built by pre64.com.
Yeah, Justin, right?
Yeah, Justin up there. Hopefully I should be getting that rifle back, hopefully before hunting season, is what we're thinking. I think it's off to coating, and he's getting a really nice wood stock for it. Because the stock, again, Pre-64 I bought, at a gun shop, and the guy who owned it carved his initials into the stock. Awesome. And then went above and beyond and engraved his social security number and his initials in the receiver. Yeah. And fortunately, whatever bit he used in his Dremel was dull as hell, and he was probably like 10 beers deep when he decided it was a good idea. Yeah. And I was able to actually remove it from the receiver with just some light filing and some sandpaper, and I was able to get it out. Unfortunately, the stock was, he carved it super deep one day when the hunting was slow. I'm sure he's like, I'm just going to carve my initials right here in the stock
with my knife.
But so Justin's hooked me up with a good stock. But the first thing I'm going to try in that rifle is my pet load of 140 grain AccuBond and the 280 Ackley. It's been one of those cartridges that, it's old, and right, there's better, performing 7mm cartridges, but for your average hunting, distances and scenarios, like that, there's not much that the 280 Ackley won't do with the right bullet. My wife, I built her a 280 Ackley years ago when I developed the initial 140 load, and she just murders animals with it. And, I mean, she just puts stuff down, like one shot, 2, 3, 4, 100 yards, like just one and done. She just murders stuff with it. That bullet performs awesome. It's super accurate. But it's just been a killer. So it's kind of hard to stray from it. And then that load's worked for a couple other rifles that I tested and worked through. And I can't remember the load off the top of my head, but I know it's reloader 22. And the bullets are probably 20 thou, 30 thou off the lands for length, but it's not super hot. I know it's not a super hot load. I know it's kind of a mid node for velocity of what I could get out of it, but it shoots so well. I'm not going to chase velocity when I'm not going to leave accuracy to chase velocity when I do my load development. But what's funny is when I started shooting the Nosler trophy grade factory 140s, it shot equally as well. I mean, the hand load shot a little bit better, but not that you're going to notice. I mean, it was sub half inch with the factory stuff. And I was like, wow, this stuff's working really well.
I can't believe how good that ammo shoots.
Yeah, it shoots really well. I mean, I bought like a case of two or three cases of it back in the day. And I'm still kind of chipping away at it just because I kind of save it and don't shoot it up. I shoot it a whole lot as much as I shoot other guns. But that's a good one.
Yeah, that's funny. That's about the only 280 Ackley that I have been able to find is the factory load that you recommended. So it worked out perfect. I just have to get some rounds downrange with it.
And you just haven't got an optic on that one? Is that why you haven't shot that one as much?
No, I do. I've really been focusing on this 338 because we have not that much time until we leave on a goat hunt, right? So
and you're taking 338.
Yeah, the goat hunt was actually meant to be an archery hunt, and we were gonna pack some rifles just for around camp with bears and stuff.
Gotcha.
And then I drew a rifle tag.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was kind of like the 338 was going to be out of the gunsmith first. And then Gary there surprised me and had everything done much quicker than we had anticipated. So I had both, but I already had a pile of 338 ammo sitting here. And yeah, I mean, that 338 shoots better than I can anyways. I mean, it's shooting half-inch groups at 100 yards right now. And it looks like, out past my limit, that TTS X should still open because I'm moving more than, 1,500 feet per second and more than 2,000 feet of jam, right?
Yeah. You'll be it'll do really well on a mountain goat. I would predict at the distances you guys will be probably getting in on them.
Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully we're getting in on them at like 30 yards.
Yeah, that's the idea, right? Get as close as you can.
Cool. Well, hey, I want to my last little scribble here on my notepad is optics, because I've been going through that battle a little bit. You want an optic that's clear and that has a good eye box and all that kind of stuff. But then more importantly nowadays with, I guess I shouldn't say more importantly, but nowadays with the performance out of custom rifles and a lot of the production rifles is you almost need to have a dial on the top of that thing. And so for me personally, and again, making this real selfish because I have you on the phone, there's so many options now, and it's so easy to be like, okay, I'm going to grab a big objective, big zoom night force that is quite heavy and put it on top of my, 5-pound rifle. And now it's a 10-pound rifle. Not, I'm exaggerating, but, and then the other end of the spectrum is I'm going to go with the 3x10 with a 40 mil objective and be real light. So for a, kind of in line with that, what do you look for in a mountain rifle? What's sort of your go-to with an optic?
and it's, I say like I'm a glass snob, right? Like I'm super spoiled. I started using Swarovski, glass or European glass, mostly Swarovski, long time ago. I got introduced to it super early in my career, and the benefits and the advantage it gave in glassing was night and day. Right. It's huge. It's hard to argue that, there's anything that can compare in light gathering and clarity, in low light conditions, which is what we hunt in mostly, or where we find game at mostly. Heat of the day, obviously, it's not hard to see a mountain goat or a deer or a moose standing out in the open, in good lighting conditions. That's not hard. But that early morning and late evening, and then not only just seeing the game, but also having the clarity and the quality to identify, like, yes, that's a mature billy, or a legal billy or a legal sheep, or, a quality animal. That also is a huge part, right? And so what a lot of guys find is they'd have really good glass to glass with, but then they cheap up on their rifle scope. But then they'd spot an animal and they'd try to get behind the rifle and be like, well, I can't see it now. Because it's two different, levels of glass quality. And I saw that early on. So I kind of always shot super high end glass, predominantly Swarovski, right? And it's expensive. But I think that it's worth it in terms of the quality and the longevity, right? I've got some old glass in it and it holds up really, really well. A lot of use. Because you got to be able to see clearly. And there's a lot of different optics out there now that offer good glass, right? It's not hard now. There's some good glass. I still don't think it comes close to the quality of the European glass. But there's a lot of good stuff out there, but a lot of it's super heavy, like you said. And that's again where I kind of come back to that Swarovski is it's lightweight, for the mountain rifle. And they offer the turrets, they have the Z5 line with their BT turret, and then the Z6. I really like their flex turret. It gets you out to within hunting distances, right? I don't need a night force or anything with a huge turret to dial out to, 1,000, 1,200 yards on a mountain hunting rifle, because I'm not realistically shooting that far. Me personally, if I can get 500-600 yards out of that 700 yards, I'm good. Yep. Right. That's where I'm going to be. So I get plenty of that out of those turrets, with a 20 MOA ring or 20 MOA base. You get plenty out of that scope. You get everything you need out of it. So the glass clarity is huge. Reticles, it's got to have a reticle that's like got some windage. I don't really care about drop as much as windage. For me, I've got to have something that I can hold. Some guys are like, well, I'll just hold 18 inches. Okay. You're going to hold 18 inches of wind at, 400 yards, and you're going to be able to exactly figure out where that is, under stress, okay. That's one way. I'd rather have a finite point, these are half MOA or half mil, whatever you use, whether it's mil or MOA, doesn't really matter. Just having a scope that's got those reference points for windage and a ballistic solver that allows you to know, what you need to hold, and a turret that's going to repeatedly dial to those distances. That's what you need to kind of focus on. And then that kind of comes back to your budget, right? Because, you say all those things and you're like, okay, yeah, cool. It's $3,000, Z8 Swaro, 2-16. Well, I don't have $3,000. Okay. Well, then kind of have to come back down a little bit. One scope that I've been messing with a little bit and I like a lot is the Zeiss's, the Z4s. A lot more budget, friendly optic. But I love the Zeiss glass. It's not too far off of the Swarovski. It's comparable in the low light gathering capabilities. I think they're on the same page. They're real similar, but they have a great turret system that gives me plenty of elevation to dial. It's repeatable from what I found. And the reticles are usable, right? They've got windage and some elevation drops, so you can do some holdovers if you need to. But you've got the windage for holding wind on animals. So, and it's a lightweight scope. These Z4s are pretty comparable in their lightweight capabilities. And their price is, it's right. It's a good optic. There's less, you can spend less. You can get, loopholes and vortexes and spend less. And they're not to say that they won't work. And they're not great, products for the money, but it's just longevity for me. I don't like buying scopes, every couple years or having to send them back every couple years because I have issues. Because again, high volume shooting, I want to know that my optic's going to hold up, and that's where I kind of fall back into that European stuff. Is been around. They've been around longer. They've been making scopes since World War I, World War II. They've got some pretty robust systems. As much as people want to slam them and say they don't hold up, I've never had one not hold up. I've never had one not track. And it's something I have 100% faith in, when I'm up on the mountain hunting, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I can't believe the range of scopes available today, all the way from the bottom end Z3 to what's available at the top end. It's a pretty wild spectrum.
Oh yeah.
Touching on just loophole briefly, I can't believe the the quality of their VX line. It sort of actually really surprised me, because much like you, I always lean towards the European stuff, and my binoculars and spotter and all that kind of stuff has always been Swaro or Zeiss for the most part.
Right.
And so I'm a bit of a glass snob, and I was out shooting with a buddy who is a big fan of that VX line, and yeah, it sure looks nice, and the glass looks good, and they seem to track well. I might give it a try here, but we'll have to see. I don't know yet.
Yeah, and I hear some good things, and I hear bad, of course, on a lot of those things. And my experiences, they've Loophole makes a great product. Some of their stuff, guys kind of compare and say, well, the Mark V HD, is robust, durable tracking scope, and it worked well. So therefore I'm going to go to a VX and, 3 for my hunting stuff. And it's like, well, might not be the same optical system to compare in terms of reliability, durability. I'm not saying that they're not, but when it comes to tracking, I haven't seen them always track like 100%. Again, and this is high volume and very meticulous. Not to say that for hunting conditions it wouldn't work, but in my experiences, that has kind of fallen short compared to the European stuff. And Vortex, I won't even mention their stuff with the issues that I've had or seen. I don't even want to mention them.
It's all good.
Everyone runs them now. It's just like, everyone gets a deal on them. Everyone's on, Promotive or whatever, and everyone gets a deal, and everyone's pushing them and promoting them. They've done a great job. Marketing is a marketing company. They're not an optics company, in my opinion. Yeah. But they make some good stuff here and there. But overall, it's just not there for me for the rifle scope line for what I expect out of an optic. That's just me personally. Yeah.
On the last episode that we posted with Snyder from Kafari, Wasey went off on a tangent about Vortex for a while and running one of their products over with his truck. So yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
I could see that. I can see that from him.
It can be frustrating. We have
make some good stuff. Look at it. Give them a try and see. Just make sure that you do your appropriate tests. Don't fall into box tests. You see a lot of guys, well, I ran a box test and I dialed 3 minutes and 3 minutes and 3 minutes and 3 minutes, left, right, up, down, left, right, down. It's like, no, that's not what you need to be doing. You need to be running that scope out to the actual distances you're going to be shooting on like paper at like 100 yards and making sure that it's repeatedly tracking those distances up and down. And then, that it's holding zero, because we're tough on our equipment, right?
Yeah.
You bounce them around and you're going to fall. You're going to fall on your stuff. You're going to bounce it. It's going to happen. And that's where I've kind of been like this year was actually the first year ever where I had a European optic, and I don't know what it was. I can't say it's the optic. I can't say it was the rings. I can't say it was the rifle. I don't know what it was, but it was the first time ever that I can account where I had a dramatic shift in impact in like one day of travel. Like zeroed the rifle, shot it for 3 days before a rifle match, and everything was just dialed. It was dead center, hammering. Went to the rifle match and didn't shoot the day before because I was just running late. It was just like, it's good. I don't need to confirm zero. I'm just going to jump into the match. And I was low and left like all day. And I was like, man, what is going on? I was just chasing it. And it was just screwing me up. I didn't know if my dope was off, if I was just off on my wind calls, right? Because I'm not one to blame the rifle. I was like, man, I'm just off on my wind calls. I'm off on everything today. My dope's just not tracking. Well, after the full day of shooting, it was obvious something was off. And went and shot it. And it was way low left. I have no way of knowing like what changed, but I made a correction and re-zeroed it, and then dope was, good, and went back after it the second day, and it was way better. So it can happen to any scope, but it's, like I said, in all my shooting and all my travels and everything, like that's the first time in like a decade. I mean, that's kind of rare to find with, a variety of optics and rifles and stuff. It's it kind of shows the quality of optics that they put out, and what you'll get from it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's tough to buy an optic from some of the European companies that's not good.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good stuff out there, and they push each other, right? They're always in, Leica and Zeiss and Swaro and those three are always, competing. So, it's all good product because they wouldn't exist in that field in Austria if they weren't making a good product.
Yeah.
It'd be gone. Right. But they do focus on other things, right? Like Leica's never really had a super high end, like quality rifle scope. It's never been like a huge market for them because their cameras and the lenses and their rifle scopes and spotting scopes have always been like kind of their bread and butter. And now they're starting to come out with some different optics and different designs and kind of being a little bit more competitive in the rifle scope market. And which is good to see. And Zeiss kind of went the other way and started kind of having not as much Austrian made glass and trying to compete with the American market, which, some guys, got a little upset about and kind of fallen out of. So everyone's kind of following different trends and just kind of figuring out where they're at in the market. So it's just it's a crazy time in the rifle world in general, but just everyone's chasing different things in terms of manufacturers.
Yeah, no kidding. There's so many options, and it's hard to sort through it all,
Oh, for sure. And that's why it's like you just get as much information as you can from reliable sources. And I think a lot of the podcasts have really kind of broken down. And I don't listen to a lot of them unless I have the time. I've got a huge bank of them, and I listen to them when I can when I'm driving out hunting. This hunting season's when I get the most podcasts listening in.
Yeah, same.
But it's just good to hear a lot of good people talk about experiences and good stuff going forward in terms of gear and products and all that stuff. Whereas kind of like because there's a name. I mean, there might not be a face, but at least there's like a name and a voice. Whereas like on the forums, it's like kind of they're hiding, right? And it's like you never really know who's really putting that stuff out because it's just a handle on a forum or on an Instagram page, and it's just you never really know like how factual stuff is. For me, I've always kind of questioned it. Whereas I think we're getting a little bit better with, like I said, the podcasts have allowed it because people are going to be a little bit more cautious of what they go out and say because like everyone knows who I am and now I'm here saying it and there's no arguing that, right? But anyone can go out and post whatever bullshit they want on a forum or social media and, not have much of repercussions for it.
Yeah. Or no context to what their experience actually is.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I kind of, I'm digging the podcast and what you guys are putting out. And there's a few that I track and follow and listen to just because it's having good people on that talk honestly about their experiences and trying to educate people in the best way possible.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate it. We enjoy everything you're putting out, and you're regularly forcing me to empty my wallet with all the cool stuff you're posting. And yeah, man, thanks for all the help on my rifle builds and my random questions that I send you at 3 a.m. on a weekly basis.
Yeah, anytime, man. That's what I'm here for. Try to helping guys out, make some good choices in how to spend their money and how to allocate it. Yeah, it's kind of the same thing. Hopefully we get a lot of questions, some follow-up. Cause that always helps, like round 2, kind of like with like that Journal of Mountain Hunting, they got a whole bunch of more questions and kind of stirred a whole new realm for that second podcast we did, where it's a little bit more directed into certain things because people have questions and start to see where people are at, your listeners are at. And then we can hopefully kind of fine tune them in, because like I said, everything's kind of application based with the custom stuff or rifle stuff, in my opinion. And I know that kind of frustrates people where they're like, well, yeah, but for this, well, what should I do? And it's like, well, what's your application, man? What's your budget?
Yeah.
It's such a huge part of it, because you don't have a budget, like it doesn't really matter. We can just go on. We can just spend your money, man. You just say when.
You'll be packing around a $20,000 rifle.
Yeah, and you'll be loving it because you'll have all the training and all the ammunition to shoot and training and you'll be dialed. But that's not the reality for 95% of guys out there. So trying to help them fine tune it. That's why I always tell guys, I'm always available. Reach out to me, message me on social media or email me. I'm almost 100% in my responses. It might not be immediate, but I try to respond and give you the best assessment for what you need. Yeah.
And your Instagram is at PapaWinkle for everybody listening.
Yep. At PapaWinkle. And then my email is Colton at westernhunter.net.
That's mighty good of you to give out your email.
Oh yeah. Well, I've got a few of them, and it's like that one's just the Western Hunter magazine one. So, I'll answer what I can and help you out as best I can from that. But I get a lot more content or requests or information or contact, I guess, from the Instagram. Definitely more people hit me up on there. I think it's just easier because people are there.
Yeah.
And I don't think people use email as much as they once did, but I still throw it out there because guys are like, hey, I'm not on Instagram. Like, how do I get a hold of you?
There you go.
So your questions are just as important as everybody else's. So I throw it out there for everybody.
Very cool. Thanks very much, Colton.
Yeah, no worries, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It's been good chatting with you, and hope we get some good feedback from it. Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave us a review. If you want to support the podcast, please check out the gear on our website at wildernesslocals.net.